Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going deep into Native American reservation mysteries. We've got a collection of stories, personal accounts, some historical stuff too, all centered around, life on these unique communities.
Yeah, I think it's a side of Native American life that most people don't really get to see.
Right, exactly. We're going to be unpacking everything from unsolved murders to some really creepy encounters out in the woods,
Yeah.
and maybe even a little bit of folklore along the way.
Right.
What do you think?
Sounds pretty fascinating to me. I mean, these stories offer a window into the beliefs and fears and realities of life on the reservation.
For sure. Our main source for this deep dive is this YouTube video, 5 True Scary Native American Reservation Stories. It's from this channel called Let's Read. But, gotta remember, we're dealing with personal accounts, legends, not necessarily verified events.
Right, of course. But that's part of what makes it so interesting is listening to your grandparents tell stories from when they were young.
Totally. Okay, so first story takes us to the Navajo Nation Reservation. And it's the center of it all is this Vietnam War vet named Cody. The story's actually told by his grandson. And he describes Cody as, deeply scarred, a real recluse, haunted by what he went through in the war. Makes you think about, the invisible wounds veterans carry.
Oh, absolutely. PTSD, we hear about it a lot, but it's so much more than just like flashbacks and nightmares. It can really manifest in so many ways. Isolation, substance abuse. It's hard to reintegrate back into civilian life.
Yeah, and I imagine it's especially tough for veterans returning to reservations where resources might be more limited.
Well, for sure. And there can be cultural barriers to seeking help,
Yeah.
It can be a lot to navigate.
Right, so in the story, Cody's wife and children, they disappear, vanish without a trace. So a search party is put together and they eventually find the bodies. Hidden in this traditional Navajo burial site, it's described as super creepy, almost ritualistic, like Cody was trying to find some meaning in this horrific act.
It's tough to say for sure, but, if we're thinking about untreated trauma, it's possible. The pressure of war, the threat of death, the moral complexities of combat. Coming back to a quiet reservation life could be a complete shock to the system.
Absolutely. So then the story gets even darker. The search party, including the narrator's grandfather, they run into Cody up in the hills, and this chaotic firefight breaks out. Several people are killed, including Cody. But here's where it gets really interesting. Instead of calling in the police or, outside law enforcement, the community decides to cover the whole thing up.
Wow. I mean, that's a huge decision. You can see how they might want to protect their own, keep things quiet, especially when it comes to something this tragic and sensitive.
Yeah, they were afraid of the legal consequences, the media attention, didn't want their community's image tarnished,
I get it. It's like trying to maintain some control in a situation that's completely spiraled out of control.
Right, exactly. And it makes you wonder, were there any support systems in place for this guy, Cody? Could this whole thing have been prevented?
Really tough questions. And I think it speaks to a larger issue about, the hidden struggles within these communities.
Definitely. All right, so our next story takes us to the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. And it focuses on a different kind of hidden struggle, mental health. This one's told from the perspective of a truck driver who has a really unsettling experience on a dark stretch of road.
Oh yeah, I remember this one. Isolation, lack of resources, it can really take a toll on people.
Yeah.
Especially in these more remote communities.
So picture this. The driver pulls over for a bathroom break, middle of the night. And suddenly, this guy named Jacob appears, brandishing a butcher knife.
Oh man, talk about a scary situation.
Right. But as the story unfolds, we find out Jacob's intentions are not what they seem.
Yeah, he doesn't want to hurt the driver. It's more complicated than that.
So they start talking, and get this, Jacob actually asks the driver to call the police. Talk about a tense standoff. But through their conversation, it becomes clear that Jacob isn't trying to attack anyone, he's actually reaching out for help.
He's crying out for help. It's just coming out in a really, really unusual way.
The driver, to his credit, stays calm, keeps talking to Jacob, and what Jacob reveals is absolutely heartbreaking. He was planning on ending his life, couldn't go through with it.
Wow. It makes you think about how desperate someone must be to, reach out to a complete stranger like that in the middle of the night on a deserted road.
It really makes you wonder, were there any other options for Jacob? Were there resources he could have turned to before reaching that point?
It's a good question. And it highlights the need for greater mental health awareness, particularly in communities where it might be stigmatized.
Yeah, for sure. The driver ends up convincing Jacob to go to the hospital. Talk about a turning point, a potential tragedy averted.
It's incredible what a little compassion and a willingness to listen can do.
Absolutely. So, these first two stories, we've got the potential for untreated trauma in the first one, then this desperate plea for help in the second. It's clear there's a lot going on beneath the surface.
Yeah, a lot of layers here. And it makes you realize that these stories are about more than just spooky events. It's about the human experiences shaping these communities.
Exactly. And speaking of human experiences, our next story takes us into the world of folklore, specifically the legend of the Wendigo. This account comes from someone who grew up on the Isabella Indigenous Reservation in Michigan. What I found really interesting about this one is that the guy's uncle presents this unique perspective on the Wendigo, like a blend of traditional beliefs and scientific explanation.
Yeah, the Wendigo. It's a powerful figure in a lot of Native American cultures, a monstrous, cannibalistic spirit.
Right, but in this case, his uncle suggests that the whole Wendigo myth might actually stem from a real disease called kuru.
Kuru, that's a fascinating one.
Okay.
It's a neurological disorder, affects the brain, leads to all sorts of really awful symptoms. And what's interesting is that the progression of Kuru, it kind of lines up with some descriptions of Wendigo possession.
It's crazy, right? So kuru, you get it from consuming human flesh. And the symptoms are terrifying. You start losing coordination, kind of like you're drunk.
Yeah, and then it progresses to these like really wild mood swings. Uncontrollable laughter, eventually complete immobility. Imagine witnessing all that, but without any scientific understanding of what's happening. You can totally see how people would think it was some kind of evil spirit.
Totally. Chilling stuff. And it makes you think about how these legends and folklore often reflect real-world fears and experiences.
Absolutely. The Wendigo, in this context, it's not just a monster, it's a representation of a genuine threat.
Right. Almost like a cautionary tale wrapped up in folklore. Don't engage in cannibalism or you might turn into a Wendigo. A way to prevent some really, really bad things from happening.
It's like storytelling as a form of knowledge transfer,
Mm-hmm.
protecting cultural values, warning against dangerous behavior.
Super clever, actually. Okay, so now we move from the realm of folklore to a much darker chapter in American history. The Osage Bloodland Murders. Back in the 1920s in Oklahoma, greed, betrayal, murder, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, this case really exposes the violence and exploitation Native Americans have faced throughout history.
The Osage Nation, they struck oil on their land, became some of the wealthiest people in the country. But that wealth, well, it brought a whole lot of trouble. The Osage people, they'd already been through so much, forced relocation, losing their ancestral lands. Now they face this new form of exploitation.
It's awful. The land they were forced onto, suddenly it's valuable and everyone wants a piece of it.
So the story plays out like a thriller. In 1921, Anna Brown, a member of the Osage Nation, is found murdered. And at first, everyone thinks it's an accident. But then more Osage people start dying, people who are set to inherit a share of the oil money. Suddenly, a pattern emerges.
Yeah, it becomes pretty clear that this is not random. Someone's targeting these folks for their wealth.
Right, and it's terrifying, the sense that someone is out there, picking them off one by one. The story focuses on several victims. We hear about Charles Whitehorn, Anna Brown's cousin. He's murdered. Lizzie Kyle, Anna's mother. She inherits Anna's share of the oil wealth and she ends up dead too. And then there's Henry Roanhorse, another relative, gets the money, becomes paranoid, and he also meets a violent end. It's just like a chilling reminder of how far greed can push people.
And at the center of all this, the story points to this guy, William Hale. He's a powerful cattleman in Osage County, and he comes across as ruthless, really cunning.
He's pulling the strings, bribery, intimidation, even hiring hitmen. Hale orchestrated this whole reign of terror, all to grab that Osage oil wealth. He arranges for his nephew to marry Molly Kyle, another heir to the fortune. Talk about a long con. And for a while, he gets away with it. The local authorities are either corrupt or incompetent.
It's like this perfect storm of power and prejudice. Hale, he thought he was untouchable, and for a while he was.
It's infuriating. But eventually, the Bureau of Investigation, the FBI's predecessor, they step in. Their investigation exposes Hale's crimes, revealing this whole network of corruption and violence.
It's a crucial moment. Shows how important it is to have outside oversight when the local authorities are compromised.
The trials, the legal battles, it's a long road to justice. But in the end, Hale and his accomplices are convicted. But even with that, the scars of this whole thing run deep.
Absolutely. The Osage Bloodland Murders, they show the lasting effects of colonialism, the exploitation of indigenous people.
A story that needs to be remembered, no doubt. All right, we've got one more story to unpack from this YouTube video, and this one takes us to the Cherokee Reservation in North Carolina. A hiker goes exploring, gets a little too curious, and ends up having a terrifying experience out in the woods.
I think this one really speaks to our fear of the unknown. How easy it is for our imaginations to run wild when we're in unfamiliar territory.
Oh yeah, especially when it comes to a place with so much history and folklore. This guy, he's from the UK, decides to check out the eastern band of Cherokee Reservation while he's hiking the Appalachian Trail. He's fascinated by Native American culture, but he's also a little apprehensive.
He's got all these stories and legends in his head. It's like stepping into a world where anything could be real.
As he gets deeper into the woods, things start to feel a little off. Every noise makes him jump. He starts feeling like he's being watched.
I mean, imagine being alone out there. In the woods, all those unfamiliar sounds and shadows. It'd be hard not to let your imagination get the best of you.
And his guide even mentions seeing something unusual, which doesn't help.
Oh man, now he's really on edge.
Night falls, he's trying to get some sleep, but he can't shake this feeling that something's out there.
It's like his deepest fears are starting to take shape in the darkness.
And then comes the climax of the story. Middle of the night, the hiker wakes up, needs to use the restroom, and as he's doing his business, he hears something moving behind him.
Oh God, I can feel the tension already.
He's frozen, terrified. And then he sees them, two glowing eyes staring at him from the dark.
That's the kind of moment that would make anyone freak out.
He's paralyzed with fear, doesn't know whether to run or confront whatever's out there. Finally, he turns around, ready for the worst, and he bursts out laughing.
Wait, what? Laughing?
Laughing. Because what he finds staring back at him isn't some creepy creature, but a mountain goat. Just standing there on a rock, its eyes reflecting the light from his headlamp.
Oh, that's perfect. The ultimate fear-induced hallucination.
It's a classic case of how fear can completely distort our perceptions, especially when we're out of our element.
A good reminder to always double-check before assuming the worst.
Exactly. So we've had a hiker's close call with a mountain goat. Now let's shift gears and talk about another terrifying story, the Osage Reign of Terror.
Right, yeah. We touched on it earlier, but it's worth diving deeper because it's just such a horrific example of the exploitation Native Americans have faced.
Early 1900s. The Osage Nation in Oklahoma, they discover oil on their land. And overnight, they become incredibly wealthy. Sounds great, right?
You'd think so. But it turns out to be a curse in disguise.
People get greedy. White settlers, businessmen, they all want a piece of that Osage fortune.
And they're willing to do whatever it takes to get it.
And so begins a series of suspicious deaths in the Osage community. At first, people write them off as accidents, maybe suicides. But as more Osage people who stand to inherit money from the oil start dying, people start to get suspicious.
Yeah, it's a pattern. And a very disturbing one.
The story describes how people are living in fear, always looking over their shoulders, wondering who's going to be next.
It's a terrifying reality. And it reveals just how far greed can push people to do truly awful things.
And the mastermind behind it all, at least according to this account, is this guy, William Hale. He was a powerful cattleman in Osage County, ruthless, cunning, and he controlled a lot of people in the area.
He saw the Osage people as obstacles in his path to wealth, and he was willing to eliminate them to get what he wanted.
He used bribery, intimidation. He even hired people to carry out the killings, all to gain control of the Osage oil money. He even orchestrated the marriage of his nephew to Molly Kyle, another one of the heirs to that oil fortune.
It was a long con and a very, very deadly one.
And what's worse is that he got away with it for a while. Local authorities didn't do anything. Maybe they were corrupt, maybe just incompetent. Either way, the Osage people were completely betrayed by the system that was supposed to protect them.
It's a classic example of how power and prejudice can intersect to allow this kind of horrific exploitation to happen.
It took the Bureau of Investigation, the precursor to the FBI, to finally step in and uncover the truth. Their investigation revealed just how deep the corruption went, how much violence Hale was responsible for.
Thank goodness they got involved.
It's a reminder of how important outside oversight can be, especially when the local systems are compromised.
Oh, look.
So, the trials happen, the legal battles drag on, and in the end, Hale and his people are convicted. But even with that, the damage is done. The Osage Nation is forever changed by what happened.
It's a story that stays with you.
Yeah.
And it raises so many questions about justice, exploitation, and the legacy of colonialism.
Sure.
It really makes you think how our own experiences, our beliefs, they can shape how we see things, especially the unknown. This hiker, he's from the UK, right? He's hiking the Appalachian Trail, decides to check out the eastern band of Cherokee Reservation.
He's into Native American culture, but he's also heard all the stories, the legends, so he's a little freaked out.
Right, exactly. It's like he's walking into this world where the line between reality and myth is kind of blurry. He wants to experience the beauty of it, but he's also got all these preconceived notions in his head.
So as he's exploring the reservation, getting deeper into the woods, every little sound makes him jump. He's convinced he's being watched.
I mean, can you imagine? Being out there alone, surrounded by trees, everything's unfamiliar. You'd probably start seeing things too.
And to make matters worse, his guide mentions seeing something weird out there.
Oh no. So now he's really on edge.
Night comes, he's trying to sleep, but he can't shake this feeling that something's lurking out there in the dark.
It's like all his fears are coming to life in the shadows.
And then it happens. Middle of the night, he wakes up, has to use the bathroom, and as he's out there, he hears something moving behind him.
Oh man, I bet he was terrified.
He's frozen, doesn't know what to do, and then through the trees, he sees these two glowing eyes staring right at him.
That would be enough to make me run for my life.
He doesn't know whether to run or try to confront whatever's out there, so he turns around, bracing himself.
And what happened?
And he sees a mountain goat.
A mountain goat. That's it.
But just a mountain goat, standing on a rock, its eyes reflecting the light from his headlamp. Turns out, that was the terrifying creature.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
It's amazing how fear can mess with your mind like that.
It really is. Especially when you're in an unfamiliar place. All your senses are heightened and your brain starts filling in the blanks with your worst fears.
It's a good reminder to take a breath, check things out before jumping to conclusions.
Definitely. All right, so we've talked about a hiker's close encounter with nature. Now let's get back to a story that's a lot darker. The Osage Reign of Terror.
Early 1900s, oil is discovered on Osage land in Oklahoma. The Osage Nation, they become incredibly wealthy.
Sounds like a dream come true.
You'd think so, right? But it quickly turns into a nightmare. People get greedy. White settlers, businessmen, they all want a piece of that Osage fortune.
And they're not afraid to use violence to get it.
People start dying under suspicious circumstances. At first, it seems like maybe it's just a string of bad luck, accidents, suicides, but then it becomes clear that someone is targeting the Osage people who are in line to inherit that oil money.
A calculated plan to eliminate the competition.
And the community is terrified. They know someone is out there killing them off one by one, but they don't know who to trust.
Imagine living under that kind of fear, not knowing who's going to be the next victim.
The story highlights some of the victims. Charles Whitehorn, Lizzie Kyle, Henry Roanhorse. All connected to the oil money, all meeting tragic ends.
It's a horrifying reminder of the lengths people will go to for wealth and power.
The story points to William Hale as the mastermind behind all of this, a powerful cattleman in Osage County. He was ruthless, he was connected, and he knew how to manipulate people.
He was essentially running a criminal enterprise.
Bribery, intimidation, murder for hire, he did it all to gain control of the Osage oil wealth. He even arranged for his nephew to marry one of the Osage heirs.
It was a long game and a deadly one.
And the truly frustrating part is that he got away with it for a while. The local law enforcement, corrupt, incompetent, or both, who knows? But they had nothing to stop him.
The system that was supposed to protect the Osage people completely failed them.
It took the Bureau of Investigation, which later became the FBI, to step in and expose what was really going on.
It's a reminder that sometimes you need outside intervention to get justice.
Their investigation revealed just how widespread the corruption and the violence was.
And it all pointed back to Hale.
Eventually, Hale and his associates are put on trial. But even with the convictions, the scars of what happened remain.
The Osage Nation was forever changed by those events. Their trust shattered, their sense of security gone.
It's a story that needs to be remembered, a dark chapter in American history, but also a testament to the resilience of the Osage people.
They've held on to their traditions, their culture, despite facing some truly awful things.
It's a powerful reminder that history isn't just something, in a textbook. It's woven into the very fabric of these communities, shaping their present, their future.
And that's why it's so important to listen to these stories, to understand the nuances of Native American experiences.
It's like we've been given this glimpse into a world that most people never really get to see. A world that's rich in history, in tradition, and, like you said, resilience.
It's a world that deserves our attention, our respect, and our willingness to learn.
Yeah. These stories have given me a lot to think about, that's for sure. And I bet our listeners are feeling the same way. It really makes you wonder, what other stories are out there? What other perspectives are we missing?
Oh, I'm sure there are countless untold stories, hidden histories, unique perspectives, just waiting to be shared. That's what makes exploring this stuff so fascinating.
Totally. It's a reminder that there's always more to learn, more to understand, more to appreciate.
And that's where our role as listeners, as learners comes in. We have a responsibility to seek out those stories, to amplify the voices of those who have been marginalized.
It's about recognizing the humanity in every story, appreciating the diversity of experiences out there.
Exactly. It's not just about the past either. It's about the present, the future, the things we've talked about, exploitation, lack of access to healthcare, to justice. Those are issues that are still relevant today.
And it's up to all of us to learn from what's happened in the past, to support these communities, and to work towards a better future.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, this has been an eye-opening deep dive, that's for sure. We've gone from personal struggles to historical injustices to the power of belief.
And I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is that theme of resilience. These communities, they've faced so much adversity, yet they've managed to hold on to their cultures, their traditions. They continue to thrive.
It's pretty inspiring, and it's a reminder that there's so much more to learn, so much more to understand.
Absolutely. So to our listeners, I encourage you to keep exploring. Read books by Native American authors, watch documentaries, visit museums, learn about their history, their culture.
Yeah, engage with these communities, listen to their stories, support their efforts to preserve their heritage, because their stories are our stories.
Their history is our history.
It's been a privilege to share this deep dive with you all. We hope you've learned something new, something that's made you think, and most importantly, we hope it sparked a desire to learn more.
To keep exploring.
Thanks for joining us.